Hello everyone and welcome to this new lesson on TIBCO BusinessWorks. In the last lesson, we explored how to read and retrieve files using the file puller. We also learned how to parse their content by defining its structure with the shared resource data format. Today, we'll look at the reverse process, how to render and write a file. Stick with us until the end to discover the functionality of the scope group. From the personnel registry data we covered in the last lesson, where we knew the date of birth, today we'll see how to render and write a new document. This document, in addition to the person's full name, will also include their age. From the XML document generated by ParseData, which includes the birth date, we'll be able to calculate people's ages. Afterward, we'll need to render and save this content to a file in a specific directory. First, we'll define the person age structure in an XSD. This will take some of the person's information, and then we'll add their age to it. Next, we'll create another element that references the one we just defined, making it unbounded to allow for repetition. Let's create a mapper that references the element just defined. We use it for each XML to iterate through the document output from ParseData. The ID, first name, last name, and birth date fields are mapped as they are. To calculate the age, we need to subtract the birth date from the current date. To this end, we use for supporting XML variables, the first to cast the birth date and the remaining ones to isolate the year, month, and day, leveraging the built-in functions that process dates. These values are overwritten for each iteration over the person element. To figure out the age from the birth date, we take the year difference between the current date and the birth date. We can use the add-to-date function. It takes a date as input and adds years, months, and days. Don't forget, use a minus sign to subtract them. Let's run the debugger to make sure everything works correctly. Insert the file to launch the execution flow by file puller. There is a error. The first occurrence is the header, so the system tries to convert the date of birth string into a date, raising an exception. To fix this, we'll just skip the first occurrence by using the position function, which gives us the index. We reinsert a file to verify the results. The calculation is correct. A person born in September 1990 is 34, while someone from November 1985 is 39, and the pattern holds for the rest. Once we retrieve these data, we need to render them according to a specific structure. We'll unify the records into rows and delimit their values with the pipe character. For this, we use the RenderData activity, which performs the opposite task of ParseData. To define this new structure, we need an additional data format, so we create the person age data format, setting the column separator as a pipe and the row separator as a new line for windows. We reference the single person age element because TIBCO automatically handles it as repeatable. With this version of the Studio, we run into an issue. The Studio doesn't allow us to configure the parse and render palettes to utilize two distinct data formats. If we link a different data format to one palette, the other palette also changes its association. To solve this problem, we set up a subprocess we'll call renderPersonAge, complete with logging capabilities that we copy from the component process. Inside it, we include the RenderData palette, configuring it to connect to the correct data format. As input for this subprocess, we set the person's age element, and the output we create an element with a simple string. Unlike ParseData, the RenderData activity requires an XML document as input. We simply copy the data coming from the start input of the process into it. As output, we get a data string already formatted according to the structure we defined in the data format, and we transfer this string to the end of the process. In the main, with a call process, we call renderPersonAge, providing it with the mapper's output containing the process data as input. We debug to verify the data string's formatting is correct. The values are correct, but what we're missing is the header. Therefore, all that's left is to write the file. First, we insert the header and immediately after, the field's body, which consists of the data string already structured in output from RenderData. First, we define the complete path and the name of the file to be generated in a process variable. The path we set ends with the % folder. The file name will consist of the prefix age followed by a detailed timestamp. This timestamp is properly formatted using the format datetime function and constants provided by the studio. We are at a critical point in this lesson. If anything's unclear or you have questions about what we've covered so far, ask immediately in the comments. Your participation is vital for everyone. So, we use a first RightFile palette to write the header. Its file name is already defined in the variable, and to add a new line we set the add line separator input to true. We also enable the option that allows for the automatic creation of directories in the path, if they not already exist. We copy and paste the RightFile activity. This time we enable the append option to add new content to the end of the existing file. Then, as the content to be written, we insert the body coming from RenderData. Start the debug. Insert the file to be processed and observe that the person age folder is created, containing the file with the name we defined. The field's content is correctly structured. What happens if a date is missing from the file? I create a file with a missing birth date. The flow throws an exception from the mapper because we haven't included any logic to handle that missing information. When you're working with files, it's super useful to move them to different folders after processing. For instance, in our case, if the execution is successful, we'll move the file retrieved by the file poller to the processed folder. If something goes wrong, we'll put it in the error folder instead. In case of a processing error, we would typically need to branch the flow from every palette using error transitions. However, by selecting all relevant palettes, we can place them into a scope group. This group defines a specific section of the execution flow, but it allows us to exit it with a single error transition, avoiding the need to add one for each individual palette. To move a file, you use the RenameFile activity. Flag create if not existing directories. As input, provide the old file, including its name and path, retrieved from the file poller. You'll also give it a new path. This new path is created by modifying the original. If there's a processing error, insert the error folder into the path. We copy the activity to move the file to the processed folder, in case the flow has been successfully executed. Now, let's run the debug to see if everything works. Reinsert all the files one by one, including those with complete data and the one missing the birth date. The processed and error folders have been generated. In the error folder, we find the file that was missing the birth date. In the processed folder, there are the remaining to correctly processed files. The loss of just one piece of data, which should have only caused an error in a single record, instead prevented the processing of all other records that did have the birth date included. As an exercise, we'll leave you with the task of separating files in case of an error. Extract the correctly processed rows and write them to a new file with the same name in the processed folder. Similarly, put the rows that caused the error into the error folder, and finally delete the original file. This brings us to the end. I hope this video has given you a clear understanding of how to render and write files, effectively handle exceptions with the scope group, and organize your files into processed and error folders. If you have any questions or want to share your solutions to the exercise, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next tutorials. See you next time.